welcome to the 5th episode of tellUs with me, GAEYA, as your host. All around the world, we see the result of mankind's lost connection with nature. We have moved so far away from the wild, and many people don't seem to know how fast and easy ecosystems are destroyed, both on land and in waters. The forever chase for economic growth has made us lost, and we seem to have forgotten a bit about ourselves and where we came from. But how do we turn this sinking ship around? Because in the end, humans will not survive in a world that is stripped from life. I believe we need to remember who we are and start reconnect on an emotional and logical level to nature in order to understand what we need to do next. This problem won't be fixed by calculating continuous growth at the same time as protecting the earth. The value needs to come from somewhere else. In today's episode, I'm talking with Andris, the bird whisperer. He's a man who spent more time in the forest than most Western people ever do. This has given him a deep sense of connection and knowledge about nature. He's probably most known from Swedish TV for imitating birds at Sweden's Got Talent. But this man has so much more important knowledge to share than only his beautiful voice. Welcome to this episode of tellUs. Hi and welcome to the program, Andris.
Thank you.
So lovely to have you here.
So lovely to have you here.
Thank you. We're actually in this beautiful forest in Järna and sitting next to this really, really beautiful river, or what do you say?
Stream, I would say, when it's a small one.
Yeah, stream.
Stream or creek.
Yeah, a creek, yeah. Yeah, it's so beautiful, and it's the best place to have an interview in, I believe.
Yeah, it's a relaxing place to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and many people know you from TV as Andris the bird whisperer.
Yeah.
And
that's me.
Yeah, and you're known to communicate with birds and animals and.
Yeah, I think as people know mostly the bird imitations that I do.
Yeah.
But it's like only a small part of what I do.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's just a tiny bit of
yeah.
of who you are and what all the things that you know about and sharing as well. So I was thinking we should dive more into the other stuff today rather than focusing only on that. So for the biggest part of your life, I understood that you spent a lot of time in nature.
Yeah, you may say so.
Yeah. And also chose a quite different lifestyle compared to many others, Western people anyway.
Yeah, you can say.
Yeah. So I just wanted to start off asking, like, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey and why you chose the lifestyle you did and how that had an effect on you?
Yeah, I grew up in a quite small village, so the forest was like always nearby and anyway. And I don't know when it started. It's like often I have this feeling that I'm like born with just a deep, deep desire to connect with animals. Yeah. And this was, my parents often told me, like whenever there was an animal around, even when I was really like a toddler, like they just couldn't get any contact with me. Because I was so focused on the animal that I didn't see my parents anymore.
Wow.
I didn't care about my parents as soon as there was an animal around. And it's been like that. Like as a child, I was like just super nerdy and wanted to find out everything there was to know about different animals and really checking facts and getting to know things and watching a lot of nature documentaries rather than watching cartoons.
Yeah.
And as I grew older, I started going more and more out into the forest by myself. Not that my parents really taught me how to do this. I just like had such a strong desire to connect with the animals that I just went out on my own. Yeah. And especially as a teenager, and I was really getting to know the habits of different animals in the region. And I learned like tracking mostly by myself without having any human teachers.
Wow.
And just like observing the tracks I saw and observing the animals, how do they move, how do they behave in the landscape, how do they behave with each other, how do they react to me, and just testing things out for quite many years. Yeah. So it was like whenever I was not in school, I was just in the forest. As soon as school finished, I went to the forest, or as soon as there was days without school, I just went in the early mornings and went out into the forest.
Wow.
So,
Beautiful.
and yeah, then I kind of started just to build this like relation to them, and going so deeply into this feeling of there's something bigger, like a bigger purpose with what I'm doing here, and with this interaction with the forest and the animals living in it.
Yeah.
It was awakening a feeling of deep purpose within me, and a feeling of deja vu, almost like it's like I remember myself being in this environment. I remember myself interacting with these animals, but like in a different time.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating and surrealistic to begin with, and I didn't understand why these things, memories, were awakened in me. But it set me on this course to really see the world which I had supposed to grow up in, how it just didn't fit, and everything seemed so weird, more and more all the time, and like realizing I never actually fitted in this world. I never even had a desire to, and it just became clearer when I started seeing these memories coming up from like living in this this environment in a different time. And like, okay, my ancestors did not live in this kind of modern civilization. And I felt like I was connecting with my ancestral lineage in a way, and just seeing this world is completely fucked up. Well, I don't want to live in this system. I want to live in the wild.
Yeah.
And I was like wondering, where did all the wild people go from this land? They're not nowhere to be seen anymore. And I started to miss my ancestors in a way. But it was then I just started to decide, like, okay, I'm not going to stay here. I'm quitting school, and I will start learning how to live with the wild. I just didn't want to be a part of the system anymore.
Yeah. I have a feeling that there is quite a few people around the world that feel that they feel a bit misplaced in these modern times, but many of them doesn't know what to do about it, and maybe don't also have the opportunity to be close to nature, and therefore it's even harder to know that maybe that could be the solution for someone to help them, like finding not that everyone has the purpose maybe of finding like the one that you have, but at the same time we are coming from this earth, and this is our home, and the home of our ancestors for thousands and thousands of years. And
it's about connecting to our truth, about what we are, because we've been brought up into a system which doesn't acknowledge our true selves as biological beings. We are supposed to live in an interconnectedness with everything else that is alive. Every single species around us, every single tree, every single piece of moss and lichen, everything has a place. Everything has a relation to everything else that is alive. Like even the wolves that roam these forests, they have connectedness to this moss here. In ways that we can barely even understand. But we can feel it in a way. That everything is depending on everything else. And so our modern society is built on this illusion that we are separated, that we are something else than nature, that we can stand above nature and we can control nature and decide what's going to happen with it without it affecting us.
And that is the biggest illusion.
That is the biggest illusion in the world. And without it, our modern society wouldn't be able to exist.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And it's, in a way, it's almost like when you're saying the interconnectedness that we have and the nature have in itself between different species. It's almost like we're trying to make up an artificial interconnectedness separated from the biological one that we already have. Like we're searching for something out there to get connection, but the connection has always been here. And
we're creating a fairy tale instead of seeing what is real.
Exactly. and it might hurt when we start to realize those things, but I think it's one of the most important things to realize that this is like the earth. We wouldn't be able to breathe or even exist in any kind of level without the earth supporting us and the biodiversity and the ecosystem there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the fundamentals.
It's fundamentals, but still it seems
Not to be there.
majority of people today don't get to understand it.
Just to mention a bit about what was the reason behind getting all these animal sounds and bird sounds. What was the start of wanting to learn those things?
Yeah, and it's like as a teenager, as I shared before, when I was really starting to interact with different wild animals and see them, it was as well. The sound specifically was like mostly the birds to begin with. It was really like I have a thing for sounds in general, like same with music. But with the bird sounds, like when I hear a bird sound, I hear every single little distinct tone that is involved in the bird sound. So I just started like randomly experiment, and see what I could do myself. When I heard a bird, it was also a way for me to start to learn all the different bird species by sound.
Yeah.
Then I started realizing, I can actually imitate this sound. And I started practicing, and I started applying it to more and more bird species. And just for many years, it was just like something that I knew that I could do. Like I wasn't sharing it with other people. It was more like my thing. And but it's also connected to this feeling of maybe different tribes people will call it like shape shifting. It's like you enter the other creature that you're encountering. It's like you're entering its field of energy in a way.
Yeah.
Its field of being. So when I meet a wild animal, I feel like that animal in a way. I don't know. It's something that's I had since I was a child. My parents always was telling me like, "Oh, stop behaving like an animal," because I was always behaving like different animals. I was always inspired by every animal I saw, and then I started being like that animal. It just happens naturally. I start to really come into the consciousness of that being. And for me, this is natural.
Yeah.
I can't stop it. It just happens.
And it's a beautiful gift, I would say, to be able to understand other species and their relation to each other, maybe as well.
Yeah, it's like it becomes a deep communication, which is not based in words, not even in the sounds. It's like we just feel each other's energy field, so to say. So the more I connect with the wolf, for instance, I just feel like I become like a wolf, and the wolf starts to feel even more comfortable around me because they know that I know, so to say.
I think when you experience that kind of connection, it brings such a more deeper meaning to life.
I wouldn't be here without it.
Yeah.
It's like this deep connection with wild animals was what kept me alive, because when I was younger, I didn't want to connect with people. I just felt like people are sick. I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I survived because I connected with the animals.
Yeah. And you lived for quite a long time out in the forest by yourself as well? Or?
Well, as a teenager, it was more like I spent most of my waking time in the forest, but I didn't know, to begin with, how to survive or what to eat in the forest, except for the berries, like most people learn.
Yeah.
But so I started out with being very connected to it, but not like physically spending all my time there. But after I quit in school, I got more and more into this and starting like more and more. I sleep out in the forest as well, see what happens at night when I'm just there. And then it's been on this journey, and I found more people that are into primitive living and so on, and learning from them and maybe learning from each other, so to say. And so in a way, in the last few years, I have had quite long periods when I've lived mostly outside and eaten maybe 50 to 80% in the summer. My food has been from the forest, for instance. and I feel often more connected when I also eat from the land, whether it's vegetables you grow on your own land or if it's plants that grow in the forest. It's like I take them in myself when I eat them. So it's like they give me information from this landscape, from this earth. So I feel more connected the more I eat that kind of foods as well. But that's maybe now we're going to, well, everything is connected, of course, but the way we went out a bit of track from this, how I started making the bird sounds. But
that's natural.
But it's like everything is interconnected anyway, as nature is.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's maybe say how it started, and it's a lot about this deeper communication. And so when I imitate the bird sound, I usually feel like that bird. Simply, I connect to that bird. So in a way, the consciousness of that bird enters me, you may say. So when I imitate the call of a blackbird, like, then I feel that I have a beak, and I see the dark eyes and the black feathers and wings and the feet that's holding on to the tree branch. I feel all of these things naturally inside myself whenever I imitate the bird sound. It might be hard to explain for someone who doesn't really understand this concept, or maybe some people would find it like, super superstitious or something. But for me, it's like, this is what I've done all my life. I just feel as if there was not really a barrier between me and other living creatures.
That's amazing. I'm thinking as well that that is something very unique and special that we humans have as a gift. If we want to, we can work our way to try to understand other species, and also that knowledge that we can be that communication between people and nature.
Yeah, and I mean, that's like, in a way, that's like the fundamentals of a shaman or a spiritual teacher, in a way that you're bridging worlds, so to say. Bridging the world between the people and the spirit world, or as we now need in our society today, the bridge between the natural world and the human world, which originally was one and the same, but because we as a species have drifted so far from our origin, we need this bridging back to the wild. And so to say, as I see it, that all these living creatures around us, all the birds, all the animals, the trees, the water, they all have like a message for us. So it's like, I want to see my role as a messenger in this, and just bringing the knowledge and understanding from the wild into the people, because the people needs it now.
Definitely, more than ever.
Especially in these times.
And that brings us on to the next question, actually, because what do you think is the most important thing that we as humans need to do to be able to change this way of living? I mean, I think most people on this planet can agree with that we are on a track that is not really seem to looking so good if we continue down this track. So we need to like take a different direction, and
I would say there's need for quite a radical turn of direction. First of all, we have to start looking outside of the illusion, so to say. See the world outside this box that we create around ourselves. And a good start is just to interact with nature, whatever nature you have around you, like to start to really study it and start going into it. And like trying to see it for what it is, and not through the judgment of our minds too much. To come back into the heart feeling of seeing that this other being that I'm looking at, it's not an animal, or how people usually classically see it in society. It's like almost with the perspective that this is like a robot that's just steering itself, and it's like a thing. They're not a thing, they are individuals. And seeing like that this bird here, or this tree here, it has a soul, it has a spirit, it has a consciousness just like I have. That seeing that there is not so much difference, starting to see that is a very important beginning. And because when we do realize these things, that's when we really start to understand what we have to do.
Yeah.
And then we have to start creating more like alternative food systems. We need to start protecting whatever is there. We have to stop this, mad machine who's just going around to make money for some people.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, you can't make a transition without some people losing some money.
Yeah.
Because the whole system is built on destruction of the natural world.
Yeah.
So to change this, we also have to change the completely the money system.
Yeah.
We can't have a system that is based on continuous growth of money. We can't have a system that is based on that a few people is gonna have more resources than others.
And also seeing the earth and the nature as some other value than money. And not only that money should have value, but also other things in this world needs to have a value as it is, and not as the end product.
Exactly. Yeah, for instance, just if we just look at this forest, for instance, like maybe someone who's in the logging industry would look at it from look at this forest value from how much money you can get from the timber.
Yeah.
But when I go into forests like this, then I'm more like looking at like, okay, what kind of value does this have for biodiversity, for instance? Like, what qualities does this landscape have for different species and for the multitude of life that it can sustain?
Yeah.
And that's the value I mostly see when I go into a forest. Because what I realized in studying ecosystems on my own is that it is biodiversity itself that is the motor for biodiversity. So it's like every single species, like I said before, has its role. And this role might create niches for other species. But if we take like big animals, like let's say European bison or something, which is now extinct in Sweden, like it has such a huge impact on its landscape when it's like, browsing and grazing and pooping and whatever it does in its everyday life. But all these actions create like ripple effects where there is open niches for a lot of species. There's a lot of plants that needs these grazed grass areas. There is a lot of species that need that they keep a landscape open and not grows over with shrubs and trees. And there's so many insects that depend on these flowers, and there's so many insects that depend on the dung of the animal. And then there's so many birds that depend on these insects, and so many predator birds that can live on these birds, and these birds have all their little key roles in spreading seeds of different bushes and trees. Like you see, it's like just around one species is a whole network. So if you take that species out of the system, it means that all the other links are going to be weaker in the system. So if, for instance, you're lacking some species in an ecosystem, this means like bringing those species back could also increase a lot all other life that is in this area. So usually a species has been living in the same system for, thousands or millions of years even. They've been like co-evolving with other species. So what we need to do is to bring back these species that has been lost from an ecosystem so that the natural, so to say, processes can kick in. And that's when you start to see increasing both in the number of species and the number of existing individuals of different species. So like, if you look at the forest today, and if we would compare even this forest, that is quite a nice forest, if you compare it to a forest ecosystem in Stone Age, it's probably a massive difference. Like this forest is almost dead comparison to what the Stone Age forest would have been, because there were so many more species in it that were supporting so many other species that it was like a huge richness both in the amount of species and the amount of individuals. Like, just imagine if you go into a tropical rainforest, you're constantly bombarded with sounds of birds and insects, and there's colorful variety. There's like something moving behind every branch, This is how it was in the Swedish forest also originally. Because when the ecosystems, all pieces are in place, then there is the maximum amount of life. It's going to be there.
The thriving.
Yeah, that's when everything is thriving.
Yeah.
And my vision is to see how people can find their role in this system and be also part of creating the systems.
Yeah.
Then that means we have to be very conscious about both, like how the ecosystem works. From a scientific perspective, we could use that. Like, we know that this species interacts with this species. So if I do this action in the forest, it will have this effect on all these species. So like to be conscious about this at the same time as we have a consciousness of the heart, where we can also understand in a deeper perspective, what does this land want from me? How can I serve this land?
Yeah.
Not just take.
Exactly.
How can I serve this land and get so much in return?
I think that is one of the most important views to have, because we have been taking and taking and taking and taking, and it's almost like a sickness.
Yeah. It is a
or it
disease.
is, yeah. And like many indigenous people around the world have in their traditions that you need to give back in order to receive.
Oh.
And to get people to understand that when we give from the heart, we will receive more abundance than we understand from this system that we work in today. Because when you take and take and take, it will be an end of it. But as when you start to give back and give in the first place and then receiving, then you have a totally different cycle and thriving potential.
Yep. Then you are part of creating this abundance of life. Then you're not separated anymore.
Yeah, that should be the focus.
Yeah, that's when we become indigenous for real, as I would say it. For me, that is to belong with the land. That means that we understand that we are an intrinsic part of this, everything around us. And we are interacting with the ecosystem. Not just seeing it as something outside of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question, because loads of things are happening in Sweden quite rapidly now, especially when it comes to the forest. And I wanted to ask you, how is your experience from spending a lot of time in nature since you were a kid? What are the changes you have seen foremost during this time? Or have you seen any?
yeah, for sure. I mean, like, for me, that was like, it still is a very, very big pain in my system, in my body, in my mind, in my heart. When I was a teenager, and I felt like I was building very strong, like a soul connection with the land around me, with the forest, with the meadows, with the lakes and the streams and the different animals that lived there. It was like I was naturally starting to rebuild this connection that our ancestors had with the land. And then I had to witness majority of these forests being cut down. And what's happening then when they cut it down, they destroy everything that lives on a certain area. Every single little insect and shrews and birds and mosses and lichens and fungi, all these species that are part of this forest network are just being wiped out. It is a genocide that you're doing towards all species when you clear cut the forest. And after that, you replace it with straight lines of trees that are having no connection to the original forest that was there. That are outside of the functioning system. You're creating this sterile monoculture where almost nothing lives. And I've just seen this happening since I was a teenager so much. So the forests, like, even though the forests were not like, untouched when I was a teenager either.
No.
They were also, had been affected by previous logging and so on. But now it's catching so much speed that it's like the last little remnants that have somewhat similarity to a real functioning forest are disappearing really, really fast.
Yeah. You can wipe up a totally, like a full forest in a day.
And what's happening then is that you're losing, well, you're going into what some people call shifting baseline syndrome.
Yeah.
It means that your baseline for what a real forest is disappearing because there is no, most people don't have a connection to what a real forest would look like because they can't see it anywhere around them. So then they start thinking like, oh, a normal forest is this plantation that I have in front of me. But that is so far from a real forest.
Yeah.
And even though I have only a few times seen real untouched forests in my life, because they are hard to find these days. But for me, it's also these memories that came up in me when I was young was also in a way showing me how real forests were. It was like I could see in my mind, I could see how the real forests once looked like.
Yeah.
It's like the memories of it still exists in those somewhat old forests that exist. And when you cut down those, you're losing the connection to what was.
Yeah, definitely. And there was, I mean, back when they did logging before, they wouldn't have the machines to go in this rapid time. And there was also...
It took a while to destroy a forest
it
back
did.
in the days.
Yeah, and even though they took it down back then as well, when the industrial revolution, like that era, it was still... some knowledge kept as well, like what kind of tree you can take down and what to leave. But that knowledge is totally like gone, it feels like.
Yeah, it's been more and more like, speeding up the profit.
Yeah.
It's not even focused on, quality these days. It's more like we want money fast.
Yeah.
So those new trees that grow up in the plantations, the wood quality will be so poor compared to what was before, because the trees have not grown up in a natural way.
No, and it's all, most of the times it's like maybe gene modified and fast growing. So
yeah, they're like the chickens in the meat industry. These trees.
Yeah, it goes through our system overall. Like you can see it everywhere.
But that, and especially since I've been focusing on bird sounds, as most people know, I've noticed a huge loss of birds.
Okay.
Only since I was a teenager, like in the last 15 years, I've just seen a huge drop in birds. I mean, like I can even look at the first videos I have from my first camera, when I got the camera.
Yeah.
Well, the first video takings I have from wild animals then. In the background, I always hear so much bird calls, like so much. It's like this crescendo of bird sounds, especially in the spring and summer.
Yeah.
And I just compare it with being out in spring and summer now, and there's so much less birds.
Yeah. Silent.
There's like so much less species and so much less individuals as well. And it's usually just a few species that dominate, and those species are the ones that are the least sensitive. I mean, like the blackbird can adapt to many different types of forest, and it can adapt to live close to human settlements. And the robin, it just needs any kind of bush or trees to have its nest, and can eat almost any types of insects that it finds, and even berries and stuff. So you find you have this reduction of species. So in the end, you just have left those few species that can survive almost anything.
Yeah.
But this huge diversity of birds is gone.
Yeah.
There's so many species that just can't live in this world that is being created. They need a really old forest. They need all this functioning system.
I think that's something I personally experienced a lot as well. Is the birds, especially.
You're having quiet forests now.
Yeah.
More and more.
Because we have a house, a family house in Lapland, and it used to be so full of life. It was always a lot of birds and animals as well. And every evening you could hear, or nighttime you could hear the black-throated loon, or it's called. And then, of course, it's the lands are harvested many times. And when I went there last year, it was totally silent. Like the forest, it was these long lines, and I couldn't even see a single ant next to me. And it was like that pain as well to see something that was so thriving when I was a kid and I was playing in those forests, and suddenly it's just empty. And it's because it's like now it's grown. Since I was small, they of course have cut it down and planted new trees. But for example, I don't hear the loon anymore in that particular place, which I was always one of the best memories I have from my childhood, sitting up in the nighttime and hearing it, and now it's nothing. And that is really, really sad.
Yeah, and that's what I also mean is the danger with the shifting baseline syndrome. I mean, both with people that are growing up in cities and don't really have a connection to nature, but also just the new generations growing up who like their baseline of what a forest is, as I said before, will be these sterile plantations without any life in it almost. That's what they think a forest is. But for Stone Age ancestors, a forest was completely different. People don't have the relation to what has been.
Yeah.
And so we're losing something really strongly there. Like we're losing the connectedness.
Yeah. And I think that's, and that makes it even more important to talk about these things, to give people perspective and, yeah. For someone like you who spend a lot of time in nature, and I know you had some really interesting meetings with animals, what would you say is the most exciting experience you've had?
Well, I remember one very clearly, which is a really strong one, even though it was actually not a moment when I did see the wolf, but it was very strong in another sense. It was in January and it was no snow, since we barely have snow anymore these winters. And I was just out there on a pine ridge above a forest lake, and sitting around the fire, drying my socks since they've been wet from the day, and cooking food, eating, and laying down in my sleeping bag a little bit because I had heard wolf howls in the distance the night before. So I decided to try and give a howl there later in the evening to just see if I could hear something. And so I sent out a howl over the landscape from this pine ridge, and not a sound. It was all silent. Tried again, still silent. So eventually I gave up and walked down towards where my sleeping bag was. And when I'm halfway down to my sleeping bag, all of a sudden a howl comes at me, just like 30 meters away in the darkness. Like, and then it howls again. And then I hear the footsteps of the wolf as it moves away in the dark.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, how long was he watching me? It means like the wolf must have been like sitting there watching me up on the pine ridge when I was standing there howling, and he must have been like, huh? I was wondering what went through the mind of the wolf when he saw me howl.
Wow.
It's like he's a human, but he's seeing that I'm howling like a wolf. And then when I was on my way to go down, then he's announcing his presence, like howling back at me, like, I'm here.
I'm here.
And
the confirmation on.
And I was like wondering, like, maybe he was even sitting there studying me when I was sitting around the fire, because I'd heard the warning call of a fox like an hour before when I was still sitting around the fire, and I didn't think so much more about it then. But maybe, I mean, the fox probably called out because the wolf was nearby.
Yeah.
So
that's really amazing. Like, I know this is a very sensitive subject to, especially here in the Nordic countries, but I think around the world, because there are very divided opinions about if the wolf should exist or not, or how it should exist. And
should not.
Yeah, exactly. And but I wanted to ask you, like, what would you say is the biggest myth about the wolf?
Yeah, it would be that they are so dangerous to people, especially. I mean, like, they are very strong predators. I mean, physically, they are very capable of killing humans.
Yeah.
But deers are physically very capable of killing humans also. Humans are very weak physically, at least humans of today.
Yeah.
But it's like they don't see humans as prey. I mean, theoretically they could do, but they don't do that today. And if they would, then we would only be in danger if we are civilized humans.
Yeah.
Because we have lost our connection. I mean, like when I was in Africa, it was like the San people, like even their children, they knew how to scare away lions
Oh, wow.
that are a lot more dangerous to people than a wolf is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that people are afraid of wolves. Like, it's like today, these days in Sweden, there's been a lot of these incidents where people are afraid of they've seen a wolf near a village, for instance, and then people are terrified. Oh, it's going to eat my children, and so on. And it's like usually it's like a young wolf puppy, like less than a year old or something. It's just, just wandered off from its pack and it's a bit lost and like just curious about what's this place. And
Yeah.
wolves are curious beings. They want to learn. They want to study. They study us in a way.
Yeah.
But usually they're just killed because people are afraid.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, that's because people have lost the touch with their own wildness. The wolf has become a very strong symbol for the wild, for the untamed. And I mean, that's no matter if you're someone who loves wolves or if you claim that you fear or hate wolves, it is the same symbol. It has the symbol of the wild. So it's all about how you relate to the wild in yourself. If you have suppressed the wild in yourself a lot, if you fear your wildness, if you or feel hatred towards your wildness, that's what you're going to feel towards the wolf, because the wolf is your mirror. The wolf is reflecting to you how your relation is to your own wildness. So for me, who has maybe connected a lot with my wildness since I've been honoring that side of myself, living with the land quite a lot. So for me, I just feel a strong honor when I meet the wolf. Like I feel, wow, I'm really on the right track here.
Yeah. Wow.
And I feel connected to it.
That's a strong message, a very beautiful one.
Yeah. That's many
reflection to do.
Many North American tribes people, they talk about the wolf as the teacher.
Yeah.
The wolf is the teacher. It teaches us how to live in balance with our surrounding and with ourselves.
Yeah. I usually ask all of my guests to name 3 things on what someone can do to live more sustainable, and that can mean anything. Like it doesn't have to be the ones that people normally talk about. Number 1, what would you like to recommend people to do to live more sustainable?
Maybe what I shared before, like one thing would be really to start connecting with the natural world. Start to build a feeling of I'm not separated, that you are in connection with something else than what is created in human society. And to start to build that connection of heart, because that is going to change so many things. And it's going to be like a catalyst for all the other necessary change we as people need to do if we want to stay alive on this planet.
And number 2?
Well, many things can be said about the food, of course. I mean, like, I would say try as much as possible to take steps towards more self-sufficiency. Like, if you have access to land in any way, then you can grow your own food and try to grow it in a way that is as much in balance with the ecosystem around as possible.
Yeah.
Like to get as much as your food locally as you can and create it where you are.
Yeah.
And in ways like that go according to permaculture principles, like that you are giving back to the land at the same time. You're not just taking.
Yeah.
That you are helping to build up the soils, for instance. You're living in a way that would technically last forever, because you're also building up the resilience of the soil and the ecosystem around as you're producing your food.
Yeah.
So like to start taking steps towards that in whatever way you can, grow whatever you can yourself and try to find food directly and locally and in ways that have been more sustainable. I think that's a really good start.
And number 3?
Yeah, I think actually to connect more with people.
Nice.
Because one big reason why so many people are dedicated to destroying the earth is because they have unmet needs in themselves, as I see it. They have so many needs that are unmet that they try to, they try to feed themselves by buying things and consuming things and getting more and more money or whatever. You think like, oh, I will feel satisfied as long as I have this, and if I have that, and if I have that car and that fancy house, and then I will be satisfied, But we have to come back to what are our needs as biological beings. It's not only the connectedness with nature that we've lost, but it's also the connectedness with each other as people. Because as biological species, we're supposed to live in tribes.
Yeah.
We're supposed to live in groups. So to live in the Western society, we're very isolated from each other.
And especially in these times now.
Yeah, especially in these times, because now it's more
now
like
it took physical
you shouldn't
form.
see. Yeah, you shouldn't meet people. They say in coronavirus times.
Oh yeah.
But we can't come away from that. Like we still need each other.
Yeah.
Like to build closer relationships with our communities around us. And I know it's very hard, maybe in a city, for instance, because there's so much people around. But to like start finding connectedness and also be closer to each other. It's very contradictory when we're in this time.
But there is so much we can do, like sharing a smile, listening to someone when they talk, saying hi on the street.
Whatever is gonna also be a start to, and eventually I hope we can be more close to each other again.
Yeah.
And within our closest communities to have like that we actually touch each other. We're not so afraid of all these that we actually, because our bodies have needs. Like we need to be touched by each other, and we need to feel that we are in belonging with each other.
Yeah.
It's like what's happening with monkeys. If they don't groom each other, then they die.
Yeah.
Simply because they die from depression, because when no one is grooming them and looking for lice in their fur, then they are not part of the group anymore.
Yeah.
So
it's the same with that. We need touch. Yeah. Definitely.
So to find what is our actual human needs, not the fake needs, the real needs. And it can be connected, and the real needs are connection in whatever form, with other people, with nature, with ourselves. So connection is the key word, I would say.
Beautiful. Really beautiful. Thank you. I want to ask the last question for today. For someone who feels a longing for reconnecting with the earth and nature and the wild, and wants to spend more time there, but has a fear for going out, because I know many people that wants to get that connection, but still has a bit of anxiety and fear towards the wild and doesn't really feel safe. What would you say to them to help them in their process?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we feel a lot of fear for the unknown, especially when we haven't had the opportunity to build a relation with the natural world from the beginning. But it is so deeply in us, in our ancestral memory, in our biological being, to connect with the wild nature, that place where we actually belong. So it is more about seeing all these feelings that come up, because they are fears because there are parts of ourselves that we have neglected, that we have to start looking at. So that is what's happening when we come in nature, because we have to look at all these things. And a lot of the fears are also based in stories that we are told. Like we're learning from the system around us. Oh, this is dangerous, and nature is full of wild animals, and it's it's dirty, or there is insects, and it's it's cold, and it's all these things that we're being taught. So it's about unschooling ourselves in that sense. We go out in nature to really to see this is not necessarily the truth. This is something I have learned. So it's you have to change what you have learned in a way. And a good start is simply to go out in nature, maybe you don't have to push yourself all over your comfort zone at once, but take a little step towards something that feels a little bit scary. You don't have to cross all the borders, but to challenge yourself a little bit, just a little bit, and see what happens with you when you do.
Yeah.
And to come into this understanding that the nature around me is just like me. For instance, people are afraid of wild animals, to see, like, to start to build that connection in their minds. Like, you can think about it. The more you think about that this is actually another living being just like me, we are not separated, then you can start to understand them more.
Yeah.
And your fear will eventually grow away.
Yeah. You're mentally training yourself as well for meeting
exactly
that experience. Yeah.
Because usually the fears are stories that are running in our minds.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andris, for spending this time with me and letting me come here to Järna and this beautiful forest.
Thank you for
It's
coming.
been a pleasure to have you with me on this podcast. I'm very grateful, and I would like to say to you who listen as well that please go and check him out. Andris Fågelviskaren on Instagram and Facebook. Facebook it is.
I will eventually end up on YouTube also, but it's
I saw you.
one step at a time.
Yeah, beautiful. But I saw you had one video up on YouTube.
Yeah, it's like I'm not so much in the technology world, so I'm very slow when it comes to reaching out there.
That's fine.
Eventually, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much again, and thank you all for listening. See you next time.